System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Friday, June 13th, Friday the 13th. Good omens, I would say. And I am here alongside with Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler and the best and most prominent and handsomest political poet in all of the country. It is Matt Sedillo. Matt, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm feeling good. Obviously there's a lot going on in the city of Los Angeles, and it's affecting people I've known for some years now directly, and it's a pretty terrible time. But I also feel that people are resisting, people are fighting back, and so in times like that, it's important to really feel brave and strong. So that's what I'm trying to feel.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely feel that's where sort of we're at as well. Emoja, how are you doing on this Friday the 13th, my friend?
Man, alive, able to crack stupid ass jokes, which is better than most. Yo, I'm gonna get the elephant in the room out of the way. I know everybody wants us to talk about the Iranian situation. We will be coming back to that soon in a podcast, quite soon. But as it is, there are other issues that need to be discussed. We already had the honor and the privilege of being able to have access to Mr. Sedillo, you know what I'm saying, poet laureate of the struggle. And we need to, what we say all the time, for all of the people, it's like, free Taiwan, free Puerto Rico. Let's talk about the problems at home, too. It's a geopolitics show, but all of that still has to connect to praxis at home, and these struggles are more connected than you think. So, just want to get that elephant in the room, out of the room, and say,
we got a big door, man.
Got a big door.
Move them elephants out. We'll be back, and then I'm sure there'll be plenty of news to discuss then, as there is now. But this is global news. Like, it's not. I mean, this is something that you're seeing. Like, we watch CNA or Al Jazeera or any of these other news organizations. They are talking about this. So first, I just want to go to you, Matt. I have a couple things I want to show you, but I wanted to get your sort of overall, commentary on what's happening in LA right now, sort of historical context surrounding that, and kind of like your feelings and just all the things that are happening there. What is your take?
Well, I think it's very important to understand that what's going on in Los Angeles is being reported a certain kind of way in the media, which is not completely accurate. I mean, the fact of the matter is there is a lot of resistance, and I'm not going to say anything negative about the resistance that you see, that you are seeing. So that there's resistance all over the place, but a lot of the burning Waymos, a lot of the chipped rocks and the scooters flying over, that's like really like 2 or 3 square blocks. It's right by the federal building, and it's over close to, for those familiar, Los Angeles, not too far from the train station, or by Olvera Street, which is a very historic street. Olvera Street's the founding of Los Angeles, so there's a lot of historic stuff. There's a lot of poetry to be written about that conflict. Where mostly what's happening, though, in the city of Los Angeles is there are ICE raids. Los Angeles is a very big city. Many people have described it in the past as like 1,000 suburbs searching a city or something like that. But you got to think of Los Angeles is kind of a region. So there's all kinds of just geographical area, terrain. And so what's happening mostly in the city of Los Angeles is that there are ICE raids all throughout the big sprawl of Los Angeles. And the biggest resistance is not necessarily direct conflict with the police. The biggest resistance is people notifying other people about the fact that there are ICE raids, and then patrols coming out and notifying people. And those conflicts happening when the people who are just there notifying people are getting gassed, and that's the majority of what's happening in the city of Los Angeles, is that they're kidnapping people from their homes, they're abducting people, and people are coming out and trying to warn people about the kidnappers on the road, and they're gassing them, and sometimes people show up with leaf blowers, and the gas goes back in their faces and the agents' faces. But that's the majority of what's happening, and a lot of there's organizations, and it's not just randomly happening. This is a coordinated effort by a lot of organizations. Many organizations are doing it. The one I kind of know the best is Union del Barrio, and they're doing incredible work. But as I said, it's just one organization among many that are really getting the word out and trying to organize and protect people. What you're seeing a lot of is of clips of the same kind of thing of a city ablaze. I mean, really, that's not happening. That's not happening. The city's not on fire. For better or worse, the city's not on fire. And so that's just kind of, this response to sending the National Guard and sending the Marines is very, it's historic. But what's also important to know is that it's not the Marines or the National Guard that are like beating everyone down. That's actually just the LAPD. That's the LAPD and the LA sheriffs. And they're working in tandem with that. So Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have done this thing where they see themselves in opposition to Trump. And I'm not gonna be this kind of devil's advocate and whatever and say that whatever. I mean, it is better to have that situation than what they have in Texas, where Greg Abbott is like tag teaming with Trump. You know what I mean? So to even have some nominal opposition is better. I mean, that's like, hellfire is like 10 degrees less on this side over there, but that is just fact, and so that's kind of what's happening. But the reality on the ground is that, the LAPD, the LA sheriffs, which were very much extension of the mayor of very much extension of the state of California, are the ones that are primarily doing the beatdowns. So it is as it always was, as far as that's concerned. And both Mayor Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom have condemned the rioters and condemned the whatever. So this opposition they have is taking place at a higher level. It's not being felt on the ground. At the same time, it is a very scary thing to see the fact that, people that are organizers. A good friend of mine, Ron Goches, he got a letter from Howley, basically telling him to cease and desist. You're going to be under investigation of the terrorism, counterterrorism, senatorial committee. And again, because he's being told this because he organizes people to be, aware of the fact that there's an ICE raid, right? So that is being framed as a threat to society. Another friend from CSO, I don't know him as well, but member of organization CSO, Alejandro. I'll get his last name in a second, but he was basically picked up by the FBI for passing out gas masks. He was target of Alex Jones. Alex Jones wanted to make an example of him, tweeted about it, and basically the FBI are following the Alex Jones hotline. I mean, I don't know exactly what to say about it, but his name is Alejandro Orellana, and you can look him up. It's Alejandro with a J, and his case is ongoing, and this happened just this week. So, I guess he's going to face charges. I think Monday or something. So, this is what's going on, right now in the city of Los Angeles. It's a vicious, brutal crackdown, and it's not new to the city of LA, though. I mean, so much of these questions, city of Los Angeles, city with so-called zoot suit riots, where the Marines came in, were beating up Chicanos in zoot suits. It's a home of Bloody Christmas, where there's a police riot against these Mexicans that were locked up. It's a home of the Chicano moratorium, where they assassinated Porter Ruben Salazar. These questions are not new to LA, and this question of cracking down on a Mexican population, now an increasingly Mexican and Central American population. But historically, Mexican population is not new to the history of the United States, and it's certainly not new to this region of the country. In fact, in many ways, it's a pillar of this side of the country. So much of this area, if you think about just time periods, it's built up in what's called the Sun Belt era, which is between the 1900s and the 2000s. So between 1920 to 2000, populations had very small populations. So this whole period of having an underclass of Mexican labor has always been the model of the growth of this area of the country. So exploiting people and then driving them out has really always been the central question of the American Southwest. So this is nothing new, but it is a very, very explosive chapter in that history.
Matt, let me ask you a question. In the state of California, what would you say the percentage is of Latin Americans / Hispanics that are undeniably, uncontroversially like American citizens, right? Like imagine you could take there's no undocumented. What percentage of the population would you say Latin Americans represent in the state of California?
No, that's a very interesting question. I mean, I really have to look at the statistics on that one. I don't really know. I do know that 75% of LAUSD, the students there, would match that demographic description. And I know that most of them are not undocumented. Most of them are the children. Many are the children of undocumented people, but most of them are.
So the question I would ask you then is, with the percentage that high in a city as important to America, LA, the second largest city, is it possible for Democratic candidates to win the state of California without a large buy-in of the Latin vote, right? And if that's not possible, how then can you explain the Democrats' self-sabotaging efforts to perhaps alienate this population?
No, it's not possible. It's not possible at all. That's totally impossible. I mean, the question nationally, I mean, is it possible? Is an interesting question, but here in California, no, it's not possible at all. So why do the Democrats do that as well? I mean, why do Democrats do anything they do? I mean, honestly, the Democratic Party there is oftentimes a container for more radical energy that would go elsewhere. I mean, it's kind of like, the purpose of the Democratic Party is to prevent these things from happening. It's not to accelerate them, and it's not to create a housing, a house for them. It's not to create a big tent, as they say, for these things. It's not to create a hub for radical activity. It's there to prevent radical activity, much more so than the Republican Party. The Republican Party is really there to. The Republican Party is very much a hub of reactionary politics within the United States. That very much does exist. I mean, they are very much there to do that. The Democratic Party is basically there to, well, if you don't like that, you don't believe in, burning crosses in front of people's houses, and you don't believe in, just having cops just run and shoot whoever they want. You don't quite agree with that. Come over here, and then it just becomes what it becomes. So the Democratic Party is not going to do it because that's not the Democratic Party's function. However, they're put in a very, very precarious. They're being put in a very precarious situation. I mean, the rise of Donald Trump, many people thought this was the end of the Republican Party because it put them in this terrible situation where this guy's going way too far, and the base won't follow it, and half the base will, but half the base won't, and what it ended up doing is actually the destruction of many ways of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party could not full throat fight against Trump because they couldn't fight against him. I mean, I became one of the great critics, at least in the poetry world, of Donald Trump, because I could just be opposed to him without having to be burdened by my own contradictions of still supporting someone like Kamala Harris, or supporting Joe Biden, or supporting Hillary Clinton, because that was just like, that wasn't even a question. I could just directly attack what he was saying without being burdened by carrying the baggage of what these other people were saying. And so I think that that's why the Democratic Party will never do that. I mean, they can't. I mean, like Gavin Newsom right now, in many ways, in optics, in sound bites, he can. He called Trump a keyboard warrior. He basically said, "Come and get me," all this kind of tough guy stuff, which appealed to a lot of people. And if Gavin Newsom was, somebody else, and if we lived in a different country, because this country wouldn't allow someone like that to be governor of California, then that'd be cool too. I mean, I would dig it. I mean, if that type of, I think that kind of energy is the kind of energy we need. But it's not, if we come from Gavin Newsom, doesn't mean anything, and so it's a lot of optics, coming from them, because at the same time, giving a press conference, the first thing he's going to start talking about is that we do need to restore law and order, but we need to do it the right way. And so it's going to, which again is looking at the LA Sheriff's Department, looking at the LA, looking at the LAPD, and his big confrontation with Trump is like, you have no right to call in the National Guard. I have the right to call in the National Guard, right? So that's kind of, which again, I don't want to downplay, because it is huge. I mean, if you look at the way they manhandled Alex Padilla, I mean, that was horrible. That was horrible. Just for being there, and this is, it reminded me a lot when they threw out Jorge Ramos, the newscaster. That was horrible. and that was racial. But it doesn't mean that Jorge Ramos didn't spend an entire career attacking Hugo Chavez, and that doesn't mean Alex Padilla is not a member of the U.S. Senate. And with all the blood on their hands. So these things are, it's bound up in a lot of contradictions, and that's the threat of a fascist state. And the fascist state does not care that you have your, more moderate sounding reasons for supporting, empire. It demands certain things, but the moderate, imperialist cannot save us from the fascist. I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because you guys have mentioned it so well, and I see. Tanky, did you want to jump in there real quick to say something before I got onto this?
Yeah, as it relates to Padilla, right? I'm reminded of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott case, who famously said that no minority has any rights that is bound to essentially dissuade a white man, right? And that's what that looks like. It's like, oh my God, I'm a senator. Oh my God, you're not really that white and you're talking over me. Get out. You know what I'm saying? I'm reminded of that over and over again, and that continues to perpetuate all throughout American history. People act like this was some anomaly or some out of spec reading from the Supreme Court, when the reality is this was actually just one of the most honest, naked moments of American truth that's ever been told. And as far as, minorities are concerned, it has truly never changed.
Yeah, I mean, well said. I wanted to just to bring this out, if I could, just because I feel like you guys have done a great job speaking to this. It does seem always like with the Gavin Newsoms and the Trumps, we had that here too, Matt, with our mayor by the name of Muriel Bowser. This is the woman who painted the Black Lives Matter on the street right close to the White House. Just a lot of things that they do that's really just, posturing. I think they use people as bargaining chips. They use these, protests and, fighting back and pushing back against ICE, who are just kidnapping people, and they get upset about it. But let's talk about this in the larger scale, because, you mentioned Texas, Matt, and I think, again, a place like California, a place like Texas, there are going to be some differences there. But, when it comes to domestically throughout the entire country, as we can see here, both the Democrats and Republicans, they love to fund ICE. And there was this whole conversation about 5 years ago with AOC. Who's obviously been totally bought and sold 100 times. But, there was this abolish ICE movement. There was the defund the police movement. And you heard about this a lot more. And as you see, we only are starting to get this sort of more during the Trump era, just always seeing people react in these ways. And while obviously, what's happening in LA is also happening throughout the country, and is also happening throughout the country pretty often. It's just not the first time these things have happened. And I just wanted to point that out because obviously, like you said, there's a long history of struggle, and there is no difference between, Democrats and Republicans when it comes to the larger geopolitical moments. So I want to just to show our audience that, and y'all that as well. This is something that's a little bit funnier that I wanted to mention. This is Charlie Kirk, and he's talking about Claudia Sheinbaum. I'm a big Claudia Sheinbaum fan, and I'll play this and I'll have you react to it, Matt, and then Tanky, I'll get you in there as well.
She's not a governor of a state.
So this is him. This is him talking about Claudia Sheinbaum. Charlie Kirk, as you know, has like a right-wing propagandist type.
She's a president of a foreign power. She's not a governor of a state. She's the president of Mexico. The nerve of this person, of this woman. I think we need a 30% tax on remittances. Just crush it. Go super hard, 30%. She is meddling in our own country affairs. Meanwhile, here's what I will tell you. While DC is so worried about Vladimir Putin, he's the worst person ever. I guarantee you somebody in your neighborhood has died from a fentanyl overdose sourced from fentanyl from Mexico. I guarantee you somebody in your local area has had their house broken into because of the open borders brought to you by Steinbaum. You have to wonder, all this uprising that we are seeing, is the Mexican government behind this? Could be. Is the Mexican government pulling any strings? They got plenty of material to work with.
So that I'm gonna just stop it right there. I just, again, Matt, just kind of, discussing what we're discussing. Like, there has been sort of like this more commentary kind of surrounding Claudia Sheinbaum, and now you can kind of see they're ramping up sort of. At least the conservatives are to kind of, paint her as, someone who's causing unrest. Or obviously is ridiculous, but just maybe talk sort of about, the relationship or the conversation sort of between California, Mexico, and all those things, and Claudia Sheinbaum as well, and just react to, the ridiculous statement there by Mr. Kirk.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much to go over in the relationship between California and Mexico, but as far as Scheinbaum's concerned, I mean, she may have a very important role to play in the coming years because, during the 1930s, there was something called the Mexican Repatriation Act, which many people were deported from this country in huge, giant sweeps. It was estimated somewhere between 500,000 and 2 million, but you're talking about 500,000, 2 million with a population much smaller than it is today. As far as, of Mexican people living in the United States. And, it's estimated that 60% of people that were deported at that point in period of time, mostly children, were not actually, were born in the United States. Not like, we're U.S. citizens and have done the paperwork. No, we're actually born here and we're deported. So some of the 60% of people in the 1930s. Well, what happened is that during that period of time, there was a president called Lázaro Cárdenas, who's considered basically the best, Mexican president in modern history. I mean, there's Benito Juarez was a great figure of the Mexican presidency who fought against the French. But other than Benito Juarez, there was Lázaro Cárdenas, was seen the great reformer, the actual man who actually made a lot of the promises of the Mexican Revolution actually take root in the country. So, fast forward many years, Lázaro Cárdenas has a son, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, and he forms the PRD. It's a great party. They fought for a lot of great things to break, because in many ways the PRI spent they spent like the next 50, 60 years trying to dismantle all the reforms put in by Lázaro Cárdenas in just 6 years. And so you have the PRI, very corrupt, very much in the pocket of the U.S. government, later on the PAN shows up, and the PAN is actually an even more reactionary party than the PRI. But before that, there's the PRD, and the PRD is something like the Green Party, but much bigger, right? And so that's run by Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, but it's also run by another man named AMLO. Right, so Andrés Manuel López Obrador is another figure within the PRD. So Cuauhtémoc wins, hands down, and is cheated. The election is stolen in unprecedented manner, and he kind of falls out of political life. AMLO kind of takes the reins. He also is cheated under the PRD, and he is taken out. Later on, they form the party Morena, and Morena sweeps it by such a huge factor that it cannot be cheated, and AMLO becomes president, most popular president probably since Cárdenas, right? Followed then by Sheinbaum. And so I say all this and give all this background history is because during the Mexican Repatriation Act, Lázaro Cárdenas accepted many of the people that were brought in, and he gave them life with dignity in the United States. So hopefully Sheinbaum will take that historic precedent example of doing that. And she is already doing that in many ways. I mean, they set up a whole new position there in the Mexican Senate for a senator who is a representative of basically Mexicans in the exterior. There's a whole Instituto de Mexicanos en Exterior, which is a branch of government that basically tries to help Mexican people living abroad. And now they have a seat in Senate, and that's Karina Ruiz. And Karina Ruiz, splits her time between Mexico and the United States. And Karina has dual citizenship, and she grew up in Tucson, but she was born in Mexico, and so hopefully Sheinbaum plays an important role in all that. Now, as to what Charlie Kirk is saying, I mean, nobody needs directives to go and fight. This is very similar to conspiracies that Black organizers have some, shadowy George Soros figure or something like this, that people need someone to tell them what to do. Nobody needs people to tell them what to do, And I'm not comparing Scheinbaum to Soros. I'm a fan of Scheinbaum too. I'm not a fan of Soros, but like the point I'm making is that, people don't need somebody in the background to tell them, give them marching orders. People can figure out on their own what they need to do, and people are doing very different things. I mean, like I mentioned at the top of this interview, most of the core organizing people that are serious organizers and organizing forever are basically just forming patrols. That's what they're doing. Civil unrest, the things we see, those are just angry people. Those are just very, very angry people. And I'm sure there's some organizations that I don't want to besmirch them, say that's just totally spontaneous. But those aren't the people I know. I mean, the people I know that are doing organizing, have been organizing for like 15, 20 years, are organizing raids to protect, are organizing against the raids to protect people and get the information out. That's what's really going on as far as like really core organizers that anyone around LA would recognize as an organizer, as someone's put in like 20, 30 years of doing this. So they don't need directives from Scheinbaum. They know what they're doing. I mean, they have been fighting this stuff since Prop 187, many of them, and some before that. So yeah. And again, there's no disrespect to Scheinbaum or disrespect to any of the great things that are happening in Mexico right now under the Democratic Party. I'm just saying, I mean, people can fight, and they have their own history to draw from. Yeah.
It was something interesting, Tanky, because he was mentioning Claudia Scheinbaum sort of in the same breath as Vladimir Putin, the ultimate boogeyman here in the Western world. And I think you can really tell that she's kind of gotten under people's skin, and you can kind of see like how you can envision a better world and a better place. And she's also kind of gone toe to toe with Trump. Just what are your thoughts, sort of, I guess, obviously kind of having her to kind of paint this picture as like the new boogeyman in terms of, creating turmoil here in the United States or so on and so forth?
So first off, I have several thoughts, right? I think about, once again, this, the machismo of America, which might be particularly kind of ironic, right, in the context of what we're saying, right? You have this man figure, this Charlie Kirk, like, we should just go in and drone Mexico and like, the United States by far and away spends more on their military than any other nation, but that's not a direct arbiter of relative military strength, right? Also, you're not talking about the complete undivided attention of the United States military, which finds itself engaged in Iran, finds itself engaged all over the world. It's got proxies in Ukraine. It's doing these reinforcement acts, bolstering the Philippines, essentially blocking down the Straits of Malacca, preparing itself to potentially seize Greenland and Panama, right? You're not talking about an undivided attention of the United States military against the potential response of a Mexican military, right? And so, like, then I would compound that with Mexico's military is ranked the 18th strongest military in the world. Like, just because they don't engage in conflict all the time does not make them not capable, not professionally trained, not about that life, right? And I just want to compare and contrast that, right? Because this is where the masculinity projection of a person like Charlie Kirk becomes very obvious. These are the people that had no problem at all, advocating for the United States to scramble F-35s and blow a Chinese weather balloon out of the sky, and then somehow think that Mexico will allow their sovereignty to just be impeded upon by the United States using militarized drones in an outright capacity for lethality, like a lethal response. Like, there is a world where no one does anything, and sometimes you're surprised, but I just don't believe these are the kind of things that a country can let slide, right? When you're talking about violating the airspace of another country with a military device, like, these type of actions have consequences that go far beyond anything that you have game planned in the 5 minutes where you're talking shit. So like, it's not even a realistic response. Like, it's not something that can be realistically done without a major status change between the relationship, at the very least, of Mexico and the United States. And it's important to remember that Mexico is one of the United States' largest trading partners in the world, right? Once again, people have this imagination where like, oh, everyone, like, it's just everyone's poor and there's no money. Like, that's not Mexico. Like, that is not the Mexico that exists. I don't know if that Mexico ever existed in the time of the United States, right? Like, and so like the whole statement is just a completely, it's white male fantasy. And it's hard to look at it as anything more than a desire to want to kill Mexican people.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt. Did you want to say something?
No.
I wanted to show you guys this as well, and I'll let you react. We talk a lot about, we were talking about Ansarallah, also known as the Houthis, and they're out there shooting those MK9 drones right out the sky. Now, those are very expensive, some of the most expensive drones that you can purchase. And a lot of times, you've also seen, the drones used, in Gaza as well. And I think a lot of people have always talked about, the same things that are coming sort of to the global south, to the Middle East. They will ultimately sort of reach the United States. I don't know if you guys remember the man who shot the 5 police officers in Dallas. He was blown up by a robot. And there is a lot of these sort of lethal technologies that exist. I'm just going to read this to you and I'll let you react, Matt, and then I'll go to you, Tanky. Hexagons aren't always MQ-9s, but in this case, there are 2 MQ-9 Reapers over LA today. Just ridiculous. And you can see those there. I don't have the substantiated, proof that they exist, but that is from this tweet here. Can you kind of like speak to like what we're facing here domestically in terms of surveillance and, the most advanced technology utilized, to oppress and repress sort of the American citizenry, including in California?
Well, I mean, again, this goes again with the what does it mean that the Marines are here? What does it mean that the National Guard's here? I mean, most of the damage is being done by the old school fashion. Literally, people on horses with sticks. I mean,
same people who beat up Rodney King. The
LAPD is coming down on horses with sticks. I mean, they're literally on horseback right now, beating people with batons. So, yes, that exists, and the potential threat of what that means, the potential threat of what that is, and the kind of the fact that they're treating Los Angeles like a war theater. You know what I mean? Where they're testing out technologies, and they're also testing out. What will be the political reaction nationwide if they do this? Then then that's what they're going to do. Now the horrific thing about all this is that in many and I don't know nationally, but in many places, Trump's approval is going up because of what he's doing in Los Angeles. In different parts of the country, because they fundamentally do not view Los Angeles as a part of America. And the reason they don't fundamentally view Los Angeles as part of America is because there's too many Mexicans in Los Angeles. And that's just a fact. And like that understanding is really terrible. It's really horrific and it's really scary. And because, those numbers, that demographic shift's not going away. I mean, those numbers, they could deport thousands and thousands of people. The fact that matters, people are still here, people are born here and they're going to have children. And, so it's going to be what it's going to be. And so these politics and that fear and that anxiety that people have about not living in the country that they thought they lived in and having, these, how are they formulating their mind? Those politics can continue. And so the fact that Trump has essentially declared, some people saying declared war on Los Angeles, but he's definitely declared a military occupation on Los Angeles. I mean, that I say that without any hyperbole, it's not hyperbolic at all. There are active wars going on in the world. So to say he's declared war on Los Angeles might seem a bit, much, but there's no doubt about it. He's declared an active an active military occupation on the city of Los Angeles, and he would not do that in a city with a white majority.
Yeah, Tanky, your thoughts?
Of course. I mean, so again, the left has talked about this for decades. Like, the United States uses foreign policy to see what they can get away with as far as applications of force, as far as the local population accepts, right? So they've utilized these MQ-9s. These are the things for those of us that were back in the day, talking about Obama expanding the American drone program, right? Oh, this will never come home. Well, here it is. I mean, it's not like this is a surprise. The one thing I would say is the MQ-9s, which Ansarallah has, these are the weapon systems that Ansarallah has had so much success with in Yemen. But Americans aren't prepared for that type of success. Americans don't even have those type of arms or even the proclivity to even think to attempt to engage a military, right? So I think about that all the time, especially as it relates to all of the people in my inbox. Like, why isn't Iran doing these things? It's like, why aren't you? You know what I'm saying? These things are happening in America, bruh. So tamp down the critique you have of the way that other nations choose to respond to American military force when you yourself are subject to that same force and do much less. But again, my thoughts as it relate to that is, I don't even think they're weaponizing that platform right now in the traditional sense of a hot war. Is it occupation? Absolutely. Is it war? Absolutely. It's a low intensity engagement. And what's happening is, you have to remember the Trump relationship with Palantir. I think right now what they're doing is they're utilizing these MQ-9s to capture the metadata and the physical characteristics of the people that are in these protests. They're mixing that and adding it to everyone's profile. Remember, the president himself and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and JD Vance have all at different times talked about creating digital platforms of every person that's in America, up to and including the citizens, not just the people that are suspected to be immigrants, right? Which, again, I push back even against the language of immigrant in a state like California. It's unironic in a world where World War III has begun over the colonial project that is Israel, because of a right to return for an ethnic population, right? We won't even begin to touch the sticky nature of those allegations, with the undeniable fact that Latinidad has been in California for thousands of years and have only been removed legally and otherwise for less than 200 years, right? So again, I ask always, where is this right to return? Or does that only count for mythical religious ethnicities that are chosen by God, right? And think again about how close that is to the language of a master race, right? Chosen by God, chosen people. It's hard to distinguish that from white supremacy because it is white supremacy. But if this is a belief that you have, that the indigenous, right, let's give you the benefit of the doubt and say that you truly believe the indigenous have a right, an instinctive right to return to their homeland eternally. I think then you have to, by nature of what you're discussing, have a different view of Mexicans, Central Americans, Latinidad, period, in California. How then is this not their instinctive native homeland that can be traced back to thousands of years of culture?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about what this was called Ura-Aztecan language families, you'll find that there are similar to the Romance languages, right? That Latin kind of travels through, and French is different than Spanish, is different than Italian, but it has this kind of same root. We find similar things with what's called Ura-Aztecan language family, which basically travels all across these borders. From basically deep into Central America all the way up to into Alaska. It goes. And so you see that those language families, indicate travel, indicate trade, indicate all kinds of things. corn, the presence of corn in the United States before the settlers got here. The fact that there was corn. Corn is one of the world's first GMOs. I mean, people invented corn. It's not naturally occurring, and corn began in Mexico. And so the fact that there was that you can trace corn all throughout the Americas shows trade and contact and people knowing each other and travel. So these things, these travel routes predate, the modern world, predate the industrial, what's called the modern world, predate the Industrial Revolution, predate, Columbus and certainly predate George Washington, certainly predate Trump, and so like these roots and these people, knowing each other and being in contact and having trade and all kinds of stuff, and if you want to talk about myths and origin myths. I mean, the idea of Aztlan, and Aztlan is either historically it was a real place. I mean, it was the homeland of the Mexica. I mean, later known as the Aztecs, who moved around. Who moved to what is Mexico City, but they originally began. And some people would say it was probably New Mexico. Other people say it was Bakersfield, California. But it all evidence leads to the fact that it was around. It was what is currently the United States, and so. I mean, this is people moving around is not, and you don't have to go that far back. I mean, there are tribes that are on both sides of the U.S. Mexico border that are still very much today banded together. This culture is very fluid, and the fact that people want to draw this line in the sand and be like, these are immigrants, it's our country, it's whatever, is the mania of what is at the heart of the United States, which is the fact that it was born in blood, it was born in bloodshed, and so the presence of the Mexican people who are by U.S. blood quantum something like 85% of them Indians, by U.S. government standards would be Indians. It's alarming to them. It's alarming to them, and I think on a deep psychological level as well. So, but I mean, the idea that there's too many Mexicans within the United States is the central question of like the kind of the Chicano or the Mexicano experience within the United States. The idea that they're here to work and then we kick them out. They're here to work, then we kick them out. We're here to work, then we kick them out. If you look at like how the Southwest developed economically, it was always on the backs of Mexican labor. It was, whether it was in the fields, whether it was in the lowest paid jobs within industrial, it's always been built that way, because we're talking about a country that was this side of the country built between the 1920s and today, right? And so they were talking about something that happened in a different era, a different period. And that period has been relied on the Bracero programs, been relied on just a lot of informal just labor. And people would leave. People used to come and leave. They used to do that. And it was, it was brutal, it was horrible, but it wasn't like today. What made people stay was NAFTA. That's when people started staying. And then that's what, the numbers just started increasing. And with that, those numbers, I mean, creates a huge panic. And this is what it is. I mean, but this is not what I'm saying is not, I mean, what I'm saying is probably unique to a lot of people hearing this because people don't learn this history, but it's not a very difficult argument to make. New Mexico and Arizona are territories in the United States. They don't become states until they have a white majority. You know what I mean? That's just a fact. What I'm saying is it's just obvious when you start looking at the facts. It's obvious when you look at the history. It's obvious when you look at something like SB 1070 from back in 2010, and then you compare it to the Greaser Act of 1850, and they're almost identical laws, and so it's, and that was, in California, one of the first acts they had. So, I mean, there's just so much rich history that someone dives into that they're going to come to the obvious conclusion. That the United States freaks out anytime there are too many Mexicans in one place because they fear that the place is becoming Mexico.
And you could argue, once again, this is the quintessential settler colonial pattern, right? This is the exact same demographic scare that you're seeing in Gaza right now. Yeah. Israel wants very much to absorb that territory, but they cannot do it because the population there by far exceeds. Remember, you're talking about a population of 9 million with Israel, and yet 2 million people live in Gaza. So automatically trying to absorb that becomes a demographic time bomb, right? Especially when you look at, again, the procreation rates of the Palestinian people as it relates to the procreation rates of the Israelis, right? I mean, it's by far and away, and so you cease becoming a majority very shortly with these kind of demographic realities, which is why they can justify, right, straight up ethnic cleansing. You know, we are now at the point where the United States is no longer even talking about officially a two-state solution. This is much the same as what happened. It's not like America shared New Mexico with Mexico, Arizona with Mexico, Texas with Mexico. They took that property. They took that territory by force. It's just the United States absorbed willingly or otherwise the demographic reality. This is going to have all of these non-white people. And ever since then, they've tried to find ways to rectify those demographic realities, right? And this is the connection in geopolitics to local politics. Because again, the West does the same playbook everywhere. And we're just seeing that playbook utilized at home in America now. I think about the last time we had you on the show, Matt, and this is literally exactly what you predicted in the face of a Trump presidency. You're like, you know, what do they think? Do they think they're going to go through the neighborhoods with guns and move people out of the country? Like, that won't work in a place like California, where you're talking about a population that is not necessarily a docile population. But these are the same rules why Puerto Rico to this day continues to be a territory and not a state.
Yeah, and I think the thing Charlie Kirk saying that Mexico's behind this. A lot of people would say, well, yeah, Mexico, of course, behind it. Look at all those Mexican flags. What they don't really understand is that for the Chicano population, waving a Mexican flag doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying that I am a Mexican citizen. You're saying fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, in the Mexican flag within the United States is a symbol of resistance. Everybody knows that. I mean, everybody knows that the Mexican flag within the United States is a symbol of resistance. People don't even know why it is. They just know what it is. I can just think about even the George Floyd protests. In different parts of the country, when they wanted to show Black-brown unity, they would get on top of a car, they get on top of a building, and the brown guy be holding a Mexican flag, and I think I saw that in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, where it's not even really a great historical context for that. It was just fuck this shit, and start waving the Mexican flag, and so that's kind of what it is. So within the United States, that is a symbol of resistance, and I mean, I know what it means to me. I know what it means to a lot of people. I see to a lot of people, but I think people just instinctively know that is a symbol of resistance. And people who aren't even from that tradition or even from that background, they see that Mexican flag and they know what that means. That doesn't mean, that doesn't mean Claudia Scheinbaum is I'm told me to do this, and doesn't mean necessarily connection to the Mexican state itself. What it means is it's fuck you. That's what it means. Here, 3 or 4 weeks ago, this kind of thing on Instagram started showing up because people were showing it. But 3 or 4 weeks ago, somebody filmed an eagle's killing a snake here in Los Angeles, right? And all these people, their hearts were all filled with pride and whatever. And then, I mean, it's instinctive. It's just, you see it and you're like, yeah, And so, yeah, I mean. Yeah, so what are they gonna do? They're gonna go through here with guns or whatever, and people fighting back. I mean, and people are fighting back. You brought up Israel and Palestine. I mean, people are fighting back by smashing pieces of pavement, and they have hammers, and they don't even have bags of rocks, so they have to bring in hammers, and they smack the concrete and create their own rocks to throw. I mean, and that's a very Mexican thing to do. It's very being very resourceful and just well, I got a hammer, I can make rocks. That reminds me a lot of things. But so no. Yeah. And they didn't need Scheinbaum, don't tell them to do that. They can figure it out themselves. I have a hammer, I can make some rocks.
And I think about this too, right? It shows again the national neurosis, right, of the colonized Western mind. They can't see a flag as anything more than conquest. It's not pride, right? It's not like, oh, this is a Mexican flag. I'm proud of my heritage. No, there's a Mexican flag planted here. They have conquered America, because these are the same Americans. Neil Armstrong planted a flag on the moon, and the moon is ours. The moon is ours,
The moon is ours.
They can't. So they see that flag and it's like, oh my God, we're being conquered. But people will resist. I mean, it is just the nature of that. And there are so many ways to resist. Sometimes it's as simple as growing your hair out as a means of resistance. It might be wearing certain color clothes. It might be, right? And all of this, once again, this is what's so funny, is these are the patriots that are bitching about this, but all of this is constitutionally protected free speech. That's even been ordained, but there's certainly not POC friendly Supreme Court of America, right? Like, these are the same people that proudly have Ukrainian flags in all of their bios. They've got Israeli flags in all of their bios, like all of these things, and there are so many flags that become, again, their own identifiers. How many people, with the POW flag, which is sacred to them in the same way that, the American flag is sacred to them, or maybe the Marine Corps banner, right? But any culture that is not, again, predominantly white, right? That flag becomes a flag of conquest. Oh my God, the Mexicans, they've conquered their ancestral homelands.
And they're seriously triggered by it. I mean, they're really upset by it. And it's really fascinating to me. I mean, see how upset they are by it. But it's not just the reactionaries, right? It's also people that don't like ICE, who don't like seeing human suffering, right? Put it that way, right? So they do have a humanitarian spirit in them, but they do still view the world with the lens of the way they view the world. So they can't imagine anything else. So they're sending these memes around, or they're sending this little not meme, but they're sending this video around of this woman saying, everyone stop waving the Mexican flag, you gotta wave the American flag. We need the message crystal clear. They're attacking Americans, they're attacking us. These are, we're all here, we're all Americans. If you're here and you're working and you're doing the right thing, you're an American too. And just everybody just wave the American flag, don't bring those other flags. And the idea that somebody should do that. It was a poet, who the first person I saw the video a few times after this. I don't see this guy out. It was a poet, white guy, and I thought he was cool when I met him at Nationals, but he was sharing this and it's like, man, that's just ridiculous. That's just a ridiculous thing. Saying that, just only wave the American flag. We got to make the message crystal clear. These are basically saying we need to just wave the American flag to prove that these people are decent and they're good and they're wholesome. And they're waving the American flag. Because
is that what the American flag represents?
Not wholesome to wave the Mexican flag. So, is that what the American flag represents? It represents decency and wholesomeness. And in their mind, yes. In their mind, yes. And those people, I do not doubt that those people hate Donald Trump because Donald Trump makes America seem indecent. And that's why they hate him. And other people made America seem decent while bombing children, and Trump doesn't. He makes it a vulgar thing. He makes bombing children very vulgar, and so I do not doubt that they hate him, but they just hate him for different reasons.
Yeah, no, well said, gentlemen. And I think it is, concerning because, like you said, I mean, we were talking about symbols. The Mexican flag is a symbol. A man, with a kufiya on and a Hamas armband, waving a Mexican flag. That's a lot of intersection. That's a lot of oppressed people's intersection right there, and they're not really interested in that. So I can see why, waving an American flag, seems like the alternative to someone who's in the neoliberal world or at a nonprofit or something like that. Not to again pick on this person, although you need to change the way that you view an American flag. It is not as, and America is supposed to be this melting pot, right? I mean, that was the way that they try to. My question is, how come it was totally fine for every Italian and Polish and Irish guy to slide through to New York, but it's all a big issue now when you have brown people coming from Central America and South America. I mean, it's just a glaring aspect of white supremacy that is, kind of staring you right in the face. Yeah. And I think when people don't want to acknowledge that part of it, you have a big disconnect because, it is sort of based on racism and based on, like you said, I mean, we talk about this often, me and Tanky, about like the United States sort of like losing their demographics, and
yeah, I mean, what right does any Ukrainian have to experience Americana, right? That a Mexican doesn't? Like, what possible cultural explanation can you give me for Ukrainians, right, being granted citizenship? South African Boers, right? What ties do they have to America that the Mexican people and the Central Americans and really anyone from this hemisphere, right? What claim do they have over a Haitian, over a Jamaican, over a Cuban? What possible claim could they ever have?
Well, what's interesting though is, like people talk about Donald Trump as being anti-immigrant, but the fact of the matter is, his on again, off again best friend is an immigrant. Elon Musk, his little buddy. His wife is an immigrant. His estranged wife, but whatever. His current wife, his ex-wife, is an immigrant. His children are all the children of at least one immigrant. He is a child of an immigrant. His mother was Scottish, and so Donald Trump is not anti-immigrant. Donald Trump hates Mexicans. He hates Central Americans, Salvadorans, Hondurans, Guatemalans. He hates Haitians. He hates Africans. I mean, he's called the country shitholes. I mean, he's very, very clear. He hates the Chinese quite a bit. He's a racist. You know what I'm saying? The fact of the matter is, I don't know of any president in U.S. history who was so surrounded by immigrants as Donald Trump. Just completely surrounded by immigrants, just white immigrants. So Donald Trump's racist. I mean, it's really very, very clear. He's just a white supremacist. And so that's just really a very important distinction, because people tend to do what you're talking about when they talk about, why don't we accept, I know you're not bringing it that way, but they have the same kind of, they mean it in a good way, but they have to understand history. They talk about like, well, we accepted the white people, we accepted them. Ellis Island, the melting pot, is one of the great chapters of American history where, even a shanty Irish like me could make it in the United States. And this, so, these kind of things, right? And then we need to open the doors just like that. What does the Statue of Liberty say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you look at the Statue of Liberty, it really comes from, a poem from, based on a play called The Great Crucible, right? And America is a melting pot where all the races of Europe melt into one people, and this is directly what it stated. And but even then, that was in its time it was controversial, because there were a lot of Anglos who were like no, and that's probably a 30-40 year period in which the Irish and the Italians suffered, and they did. The Italians were lynched. I mean, that happened, and people did suffer. But that's a period in U.S. history. When you compare that to the experience of Mexican people, the oppression and horrific oppression of Mexican people in the United States not only far exceeds what you're talking about with those examples, but it actually extends before and after. It happens before, it happens earlier, and it happens after. It continues on. It continues on and on and on. So it's not really analogous. They're not comparable. The Mexicans are not the new Irish. They're not the new anything like that. That's not the case. And in fact, many of these Eastern European groups of people from Europe came to the United States, did suffer somewhat on the East Coast, and they moved west. And they became the planters and growers, and the same people who were, shooting at field workers when they tried to organize. Many of those were Czech names. Many of those were, those growers were, from Czechoslovakia. They were from Armenia. They were Greek. A lot of those people was just Anglo. So a lot of those, that experience of European on European violence was solved by many people by moving west into California, where they lived off the backs of Mexicans. So there's it's a pretty gross kind of analogy when you actually look at the actual history of what happened. that white people coming to the East Coast who may have felt oppression there left, moved west, and could be, actual white people. The promise of Manifest Destiny was largely what solved the question of the melting pot.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gangs in New York, when, and the butcher, when he kind of sees these Irish guys hop off the boat, and he's like, this is not my future. This is not what I want. They didn't fight, in the, Revolutionary War. And you're so right, man. There's so many layers sort of to the United States and all these things. And you're right. I appreciate the pushback there. I'm going to just go ahead and say, thank you so much for being here, Matt. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Cast, all those good things. I want to shout out. You're not able to see our lovely faces, and they are lovely. Shout out to our patrons. We're, patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. Follow us on Instagram, InnerCityLeft.com, Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins. Folks, please go out there, check out Matt Sedillo's books, Mowing Leaves of Grass and City on the Second Floor.
Mexican Style came out.
And what was that, Matt?
Latest book, Mexican Style.
Mexican Style out right now. My apologies. That's one I do need to get. So please support Matt. His work is seen throughout the world, and we appreciate him being on the show as well. But please support him. I want to go ahead and just say, do you have any final thoughts, Tanky? And then I'll get to you, Matt. You can kind of close us out.
It's raining in Tel Aviv. We'll be talking about that very soon.
Matt, any final thoughts? And again, thank you so much for being on the show. And you can tell people where they can find you as well.
All right, what's happening in Los Angeles can also happen in other places. Oftentimes, the examination of Chicano history or the history of Mexicans with the United States is really under the study of the history is underdeveloped, but does not mean it is not a crucial factor within the United States. So many oppressive things that happened first in California were later experienced all across the country. If you look at many of the anti-vagrancy laws, which would become Jim Crow and the Black Codes, many of them began in California against California Indians. A lot of those exact laws were taken from California and taken over there. Maybe in the North as well, but you're talking about the 1800s, before slavery even ended, a lot of those laws were kind of figured out, in California. The modern eugenics movement began in California before it hit Nazi Germany. It actually began, a lot of that stuff began in California at Stanford, Berkeley, a lot of these places. And again, the test subjects were mainly Mexican people. So a lot of the things that happened to us will later happen. The resistance things also oftentimes has begin here. Many people may not be familiar with the legal case Miranda versus Arizona. They might not be they're definitely not familiar with the figure of Ernesto Miranda, but they are familiar with their Miranda rights. When you know your Miranda rights, that actually comes from a case against a Chicano named Ernesto Miranda that began in Arizona, and it began because of a historic struggle because Mexican people were not being given their legal rights and they're just getting beaten up, thrown in jail. And so the fight against those things, the book bans we saw in recent years, the first major book ban in the 2000s happened in Tucson, Arizona, and it was against Mexican American studies. So just because this isn't studied doesn't mean it's not historically important. It does not mean that we're not often the first to experience something. And we're not always the first to experience it. But sometimes when we are the first experiencing, it's going to be experienced by other people as well. So it's not just important for people who are of Mexican descent or Chicanos to know their own history. It's important for everyone to know this history. So they too can prepare for what's coming. Because just because it's only happening to Mexicans right now does not mean it can't happen to you as well. So that's my final message.
And thank you so much. Matt, we'll have all of your information in the description. I love this. I love this intersectionality. Black Americans, Chicanos, Palestinians, we all coming together. We all oppressed peoples in this world, and we supporting and appreciating each other. And like you said, showing love to the people who are really out there. Trying to save their family members, trying to push back in their communities. We salute y'all.
I apologize. One last thing.
Go ahead, Matt. Yes, go ahead.
Free Alejandro Orellana.
That's a fact. We'll let that be the final word for Matt Sedillo, Emoji Lil Tanky Summer. I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.